Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, today I have for you a yoga instructor, Aziz Kaur, and she's here to help us understand what yoga is because we throw around terms all the time and we don't often stop to define them. What forms of yoga will suit you best, particularly if you're struggling with anything having to do with trauma, like complex post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, which can present the challenge of clearing your mind being very, very difficult indeed. And so one of the reasons that I asked Aziz here today was that she has this wonderful, kind, patient vibe to her. And I thought she was one of the better people to introduce you to the subject. Aziz, hey, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate this.
I'm having a lot of fun with all the people I'm interviewing, and I was particularly looking forward to this because yoga is such a powerful tool when you get into that practice. But a lot of people, the challenge is finding the way to be still. So, what are the challenges that you faced getting into a yoga practice?
So I know that just a little background of my history with yoga is I grew up with it. My dad taught my brother and I when we were very little. So it was kind of more of a philosophy that we grew up with, and then also the physical practice. And the way I was taught was to help manage some injury prevention related to sports. So a lot of that, it just really was a nice way to weave in yoga for him to share it with us as a practice. But that doesn't go to say like I have had my struggles with yoga and having a consistent practice. So I know that I kind of in my own body needed to explore other ways of movement. And when I needed to come back into yoga, it is such a still practice, and I love that about it. But my body and mind weren't ready to be still. So it really just takes, for me, what worked the best was inviting very small amounts of time into the day where I could practice being still. So I had a goal that I could actually succeed in. And then once I met it, I could, elongate the practice, the time that I really dedicated to it. So for me personally, having it be time based that I could set incremental values that I could achieve was really helpful.
Now, like really quickly, even though it's a term we hear almost daily in modern society, can you tell me what yoga is?
Yeah, so I love this question because it should be such a simple answer, but it is so complex, and I'm only now even getting deeper into understanding what yoga is. So, just very literally, yoga, the root word of it means union or to yoke. And this word isn't just a physical practice, it's a philosophy again. So, this unification is of your mind, body, and spirit, so you can transcend the self with a capital S. So, in essence, the practice we know it as is physical, but what it means is that you're trying to let go of any aspect of the physical so you can achieve this higher level of consciousness, or even beyond that. It's a state of bliss called samadhi, which your body, your thoughts really don't matter. It's something, a super conscious level of being in the world.
And moving in flow with the universe to try and connect
Yes.
your mental, your physical energy into a universal flow, which
Hmm.
when you talk about overcoming the self with the capital S, in spiritual journeys, that's frequently referred to as ego death, which is best
Yeah,
achieved when kind of stepping outside of yourself. And
exactly.
ideally, that is what yoga helps you do because
Hmm.
particularly, and everybody who listens to me for any length of time knows that I really try to help people because there are so many people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, and we don't have good coping tools in a society that is go 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 and hustle
Yeah.
culture. And learning how to be able to be still enough, to be relaxed enough, to take things in a greater perspective. And that is one of the things that I don't now, spoiler alert, I actually don't practice yoga. I do meditate, and that's what I do, and I
Hmm.
do flexibility work, but I actually like to weight lift. And I did used to do yoga, but I had difficulty with that connection and found that I needed to spill off all of my physical energy before I was able to connect. Is that one
Mhm.
of the challenges you faced in your practice? What do you do when you've got just too much going on in your head? What are the steps you take to try and get into the space that you need to be in?
Yeah, and I really understand that piece that you just said, where it's so hard to just still your mind when you're in movement. And it's beautiful what you just shared too, that you needed to almost let all of that go in your physical body, have that activity before you meditated. Um, there's a text within yoga called the Yoga Sutras, and just a fun fact, like there are 196 sutras, which are like lines that share about the practice of yoga. Only four of them have anything to do with your physical body. The rest is all about the mind. So in essence, the physical practice that is very popular is just this tiny amount. And the bigger practice of yoga is that meditation. So I would argue that you are doing yoga because you are able to sit and be with your thoughts, or not with your thoughts, almost like recognize what's happening and have that moment to just become still with your own self. That awareness and just being is yoga. And yeah.
What an excellent point, and one that I've never, I mean, it makes perfect sense with everything that I know about yoga already, but I had not approached it from that other perspective. You're giving me a new view on it. It's a different facet of yoga. That yoga, which is actually a mental practice that evolves into involving your body to get greater energetic and universal flow. And
Exactly.
now, did yoga start out in India?
Yes, so the roots of it, so these texts that I'm reading and studying now, the roots of them are within that Indus Valley civilization, like really ancient sages coming up with these practices and writing them down. It was an oral tradition before it became written down and compiled into a textual form. So the tradition itself is, it's of that part of the world, which is really beautiful. And it has, I think each part of the world has a practice that ends up having a physical component and a spiritual component, because that's really, I feel like the big question of existence for a lot of people. And it's been the question from thousands of years until now. I kind of appreciate that, yoga is from that part of the world, and then other parts of the world have their own traditions that they like to share.
And again, it's not now, unlike a lot of the magic practices I discussed, yoga is not considered a closed practice. But every single practice that you approach, you will get a greater benefit from it if you understand the framework upon which it stands. And one of
Mhm.
the things you pointed out at first, I think, is the thing that is skipped, particularly in Western culture, that it is a connection to your higher consciousness that is being achieved through trying to release the barrier of self to join with a universal flow, to be in flow with that universal energy. And Aziz, I would normally be the one answering this, but I'm going to turn it over to you. Why would people want to do that? Why do people want to be in flow? What does it give us?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it gives you peace. It gives you yourself back, your true essence. It's a connection to something bigger than you. Just for me, I think that's a beautiful way of being in the world. If you actually connect to something that's higher than just your physical body with the physical and mental fluctuations that you're managing day to day. If you can transcend that, how beautiful.
One of the things that I've always found compelling about the concept of meditation and yoga is that, and stop for a moment and consider this, anybody who's listening, we live most of our lives trying to get to the thing that's coming next. What do I have to do today? What's on my schedule? What do I need to get off my checklist? We have a very forward facing approach to our lives, and we're frequently very depleted by what it takes to maintain those lives because of that always forward facing presentation that we take. And yoga tells you to drop into the moment, to be in this moment. And that is where everything good in life is actually contained. As we try and rush and rush and rush to the next thing, what we don't understand is that we've got tunnel vision and we're blocking out everything that this moment contains. And yogic practices help you assess your life, both for the things that you need to release, whether it's anger or fear or any of the things that our modern day world breeds within us, but it also gives us the time to appreciate each moment as it passes. And guys, that's the stuff of happiness. So Aziz, What yoga would you recommend for people who what somebody who has not done this practice yet? What would you suggest that they do to begin approaching a yoga practice?
I love this question. So I think in yoga, there's something called an eight-limbed path, and there are eight subsets to reach samadhi, which is this ultimate goal, right? It's kind of elusive because it's kind of hard to get the time to do it. But the first three stages are something called asana, which is a physical practice, which is movement, getting into your body. Then pranayama, which is breath work and being connected to how you're breathing, and also breathing very mindfully. So there are so many yogic breath techniques that are used in conjunction with the physical postures so that you're getting a cleansing. Because if you're in your body, what you are trying to do is cleanse whatever your body doesn't need. And everyone kind of knows there's this detoxifying effect when you actually do yoga postures and hold them. The same goes with your breath, and combining the two allows for that detoxification process to happen both physically and in that kind of more thought wave level. And then the third component of that is a meditation, or a deeper concentration after you've developed some sort of a physical stance that you can sustain and been able to work through the breath. Then you can finally have some time or peace to meditate, which is why you were sharing when you were sharing about needing to release just in your body before you meditate. It's written into this kind of subset within yoga.
And that's, again, that's the practice. The thing that keeps people distant from a practice is that it feels, I'm not even going to say counterintuitive. It feels almost as if you're self-sabotaging when you try
Yeah.
and fill your mind, because we do have a get to the next thing, pay that bill, make that appointment type of
Hmm.
culture. And in reality, what happens isn't that you do less. It is that as you do things, you are in greater flow and at peace.
Hmm.
So even though it is very, very challenging, a lot of trauma survivors, and I speak about trauma survivors a lot because there's a lot of trauma survivors. And until recently, there weren't a lot of good techniques available outside of a therapeutic atmosphere. And realistically, not everybody can afford a therapist. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I send people to is a site called Do Yoga With Me, which is a guy out of Canada.
I love that.
Awesome. They have practices for people from beginner to beyond expert, where I'm a little bit afraid of what these people can do, but they can do it so, so well. So
Yeah.
that's one of the free resources. Is you if you begin going towards a practice and you're not, because the other thing is social introversion among trauma survivors can be very
Oh,
difficult.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
COVID, of course, presented some challenges as well. So
Yeah.
what yogic practice do you suggest for somebody who is their mind is a beehive right now and they
Mhm.
simply don't know where to start? What do you suggest they do?
Of course, I love that too. I think so. There are something called sun salutations, and it's you can Google it. There's I know free resources on YouTube. It is a way to just get the body moving because you are engaging your spine, your core, your body in ways that are just going to be helpful for you in terms of mobility and, walking around in the daily world. But in terms of a physical practice, I think that's a wonderful way to start so that you can actually build that fluid movement and just notice where your spine is. But there are so many different styles of yoga, I'll be very honest, and it gets very confusing. Um, and a lot of them, it's a practice that's so ancient, which means that it has been translated into different ways of moving, which is fine. It's become a workout. And I also honor and recognize that that's what people need to calm the body and just feel good in themselves. But I would start with something simple like a sun salutation that engages all the muscles in the way that you want to say hello to them before kind of moving on to more advanced yoga techniques. There are, so I know with a lot of trauma, it's really areas of the body that end up being stiffened, and it's certain very specific areas like your hips, your shoulders, your heart, your chest. And there's a style of yoga called restorative yoga or yin yoga. And I really like that because you get to support your body with a lot of props. So if you ever, and choose to take a yin yoga or restorative yoga class, just make sure to get any prop available in that studio, blocks, bolsters, straps, and you can prop yourself up in these shapes so that you're releasing muscles and tension, but you're also allowing your body to feel safe by having props around you. So those are just some simple practices that I would honestly recommend, or even going to a yoga therapist to learn some specific postures for your body. And there's within Ayurveda, which is another kind of sister science to yoga, we have a system where we recommend postures depending on the season. So, for example, the summer is a very heating season, and you want to kind of recommend postures that are on the ground. So supine, laying on your belly and you're doing cobra poses, or kind of just twist on the ground so that you're not overheating your body, but you are accessing detox and you're accessing ways to cleanse physically in your own self.
Well, and one of the things that you pointed out, and like very quickly, I'm going to double back on something since agoraphobia, where people have a fear of going outside, is incredibly
Yeah.
common. Deep trauma survivors as well. Please remember, you are but one Google search away from finding online resources as well. And when it comes to props, I know when I first started doing it, I was using a site that talked about rolling up blankets and using books as blocks. And there are ways around this because I'm always concerned that people don't have the means for things, but it doesn't mean in the modern age where we carry a pocket wizard with us wherever we go because our phones can connect us to anything. It doesn't mean you're precluded from feeling a part of a practice because Aziz, you and I've read for Aziz. That is one of the ways that I know her. And I've actually
Yeah.
never met you in person, I don't believe. Have I? I haven't.
You have once, yeah.
Oh, that's correct. That's right. I met you in my office. But whenever I connect with somebody online, there is no appreciable difference from when they're physically present to when we are doing a remote connection like this. So please remember, with the kind of collective consciousness that can come from being part of a practice, which we see that in magic with people joining together to try and achieve certain ends. When you join with another's energy with the end goal of that person achieving peace and clarity and comfort within their spirit and their soul, there is even worth to, until you're ready, simply watching yoga classes online. There are wonderful, fabulous presenters out there who just commit to watching it for the 15 minutes if that's all you can do to begin with. And the one that I also tell people about is something called training wheel meditation, where, go take a walk in the park first, fill off some of that energy, and then sit down and count your breath in and out so 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out. And you go up to, I personally go up to 11 because the 11-11 thing, but you can go up to 10 and then you begin again. And when you begin, you might want to set the standard of, I'm going to do this for 3 repetitions of 10 or 11. And that starts to get you in, and it gives your mind something to focus on, because trauma survivors are often unable to shut their minds down because they were in situations where they simply were not safe. And so not being aware of your surroundings or really blissing out sounds like the most perilous thing in the world, when in fact it is one of the most healing things. What type of yoga would help for somebody who has a permanent injury?
A permanent injury. So I just want to clarify that. Like, are we talking about like, well,
Very specifically, I have a surgically reconstructed heel from a car accident a long time ago. There's a lot of people who have some form of disc problem or surgical reconstruction, or particularly in older people, you see it in all of their
shoulder.
So
Yeah.
does chair yoga work for people? Is that
Yes.
something that can help improve their
I
flow?
was just going to share. Chair yoga is completely amazing for that. And I would look for exercises that have some awareness of mobility. So you can work with any range of motion, honestly, in yoga shapes, and work with what you can do. Because obviously, when you have that range of motion, accessing any type of movement is at least better than not doing it at all. So work with what you have, keep it in motion, whatever degree that is. There's chair yoga. Again, restorative yoga is really helpful because the options that are available for it, sometimes it's really just doing floor exercises with very minimal actual movement, but it's very profound in what the effect is in your body. There's also a yoga nidra, which is used for sleep, but it's basically laying down and it is body awareness, which is beautiful. So I would say it's more of a meditative practice, but if you, and it's, I just want to also piggyback off of that and say it is very meditative and it requires you to be still. So if there is something that you can do before to release energy in your body, and that can be shakes, or little movements of your arms and body, maybe even a walk, a slow walk, anything like that, or even, neck rolls, moving side to side, anything that's very small before you are seated or laying down in that position is helpful. Yoga Nidra is great, and I will just personally share anytime I've taken a class that way, I've always fallen asleep by the time you get up to my forearm. But I also know that I hold a lot of anxiety, but it also manifests as I just need to go to sleep right after. So in the middle of it, I'll be out.
Yoga Nidra is something that I actually have recommended for clients because one of the things that it does is it is a guided meditation in most forms. So your instructor or the recording that you're listening to is supplying the imagery that you need to envision. And
Mm.
that is, again, we're talking about people who have the challenge of stilling their mind, which is so many people. And that is one of the tools. If somebody is telling you to think of the bright blue sky or the bright green grass in a meadow with the sun beating down on it, these are very restful images that your mind's eye can conjure, and it begins to again put you in flow with the voice you are listening to, but also to provide your mind with positive stimulus, which is really what we're talking about with yoga and trying to be in a better energetic flow, is that you are changing a negative feeling, perhaps of anxiety or of drive or of that kind of fear monster that sort of like nibbles on the back of all of our necks with what happens if I don't get everything done that I'm supposed to. Usually nothing, guys. We really over invest in the idea of urgency in most of the things that we're doing. And that is one of the things that I personally have seen yoga teaching people. What do you get out? Because you're a yoga instructor. What do you personally find it helps you with in terms of your ability to connect? Because you're guiding people through this process.
Yeah, so I have a lot of difficulty stilling my mind, and that's my personal practice. So, like for me, the best way I've been an athlete growing up, so the best way for me is to release in my body physically before I can prepare my body for that meditative state. So that's sequentially how I do it, and it's been very helpful. And it's also been extremely frustrating because injuries happen, and you have to accommodate for so much physically. But it has been the most helpful for me to release in that way. I'm also just having a thought that I want to share. So in India, when you go, I used to go walking in the park with my aunt at this place near her home, and there would be people doing yoga outside, and it's people of all ages. And a lot of the stretches that they were doing were they were with mobility and focus. So it's really just keeping like they were standing. I'm going to demo it from the waist up, but standing with their feet hips width distance apart, but it can also be on a chair with their elbows by their sides and just moving side to side. Because in the morning, when you're actually moving side to side like this, you're getting some activation of your core muscles, but more importantly, you're just starting to move all of your rib cage, which means that your internal organs are also getting a massage, and that's helping with digestion, metabolism, and it's such a simple movement. And then they would start adding breath to it and then moving side to side, like reaching arms up overhead like that. So it really is very simple in how you can start to move your body and release and just say good morning to your muscles on the external part of the skeleton, but also your digestive organs. You're getting some cardiovascular strength because it's not easy to continue to do this for a long time. So I did want to share that. It just came to me and I needed to share.
And one of the things that we're talking about, particularly when we're trying to heal, because regardless, almost everybody is trying to release an energy that did not serve them. So whether or not you're
Mhm.
a deep trauma survivor or whether you just got a stressful job, one of the things you want to do to both increase your ability to intuit things, which is we all basically have the ability to be guided by our higher self. Our higher self stands essentially outside the flow of time. And so it is able to see in many directions in a way that our 3D self struggles with. So, one of the reasons that something like yoga and a meditative practice becomes so essential to healing is it connects you to that part of yourself, the part of yourself that doesn't worry as much because it already knows the outcomes. Often we're
Mm.
on the right path, but we don't accept that part of ourselves because we do live in a very fear based society where everything's about need and trying to control what we do have and trying to control our outcomes. Yoga is about trying to be in flow so that the universe can carry you forward to what is best for you, potentially to your next lessons, which sometimes our lessons are difficult, but they do teach us something about our strengths whenever we're challenged. You also had mentioned injuries and having to recover from them. One of the things that I had understood is that we store different emotions in different parts of our body. And, like, as a for instance, whenever I'm telling somebody to work on their sacral chakra, where a lot of impulse and anger can be stored, is I have them working on their abdominal area and then stretching out their hips. Is this
Mhm.
something you found to be true as well? Can people, for instance, grief process through a yoga
Yeah.
practice?
Oh, yes, 100%. I think our muscles, our tissues hold every emotion that we're actually going through. And it's so intuitive, right? Like when we are scared, our core engages, we literally stiffen up. So of course that's going to have manifestations and some repercussions as you continue to have that emotion be the most recurring theme in your life for a while. And it does take you working on it, and releasing it. And it takes a long, I mean, time is relative when you're actually talking about yoga because everyone's going to heal on a different time. But it does take a consistent practice and dedication to it if you're trying to make that change.
Right. Um, One of the things that you have a background in has to do with nutrition, does it not?
Yes, so Ayurveda, which I mentioned earlier, it's a sister science to yoga. And I'm just going to explain it really quickly in terms of yoga is about self transcendence. So it's about kind of almost leaving the body. It's like, as you also said, ego death. Ayurveda is a science of life and longevity. So what, they're very nice sisters, but they have like a very different end goal, right? One's to make you live until you're 150, essentially. The other one is the body doesn't matter. I don't matter. I'm one with the universe. I'm in flow. But in a practice, we can do them together. And I think it's right now we're in the age of we want to be sustained physically, have access to meditation, but also know how to feel our bodies really well so that we're feeling nourished in our soul.
That mind body connection, there's another reason that people should consider it. And it is partially that, particularly in our society in the United States and in other societies, we walk around concealing our feelings and our responses from others. Now, some of that is necessary, right? You have to
Mhm.
learn the persona to put forward, the part of yourself that you bring forward to cope with certain things like work environments, having a work persona
Yeah.
versus your relaxed at home persona. But when we are repressing our feelings, sometimes from necessity or sometimes for safety, our emotional body still stores that energy. And one of
Yeah.
the things that yoga and proper nutrition can do is to kind of make your system more efficient in releasing the energies that don't serve you. So that's yet another reason that trying to be in an energetic flow with a meditative practice and a flexibility practice, which not like, even though I don't practice yoga in any, I go to classes, things, I still do all kinds of yoga stretches almost daily because flexibility is one of the things that will aid you most in your aging process, in making sure that you are staying in the best physical condition that you can be. And it's not about the society's judgment of what shape and size we're told we must be. It is to function with optimal health and optimal energy is why we would wish to go towards this. Now, have you ever had a period of your life where you were unable to practice, or has this been since you were a child?
No, I mean, I'm going to be very honest. The past 5 years, it has been difficult for me to practice. One, for the pandemic, I kind of left. I was doing it very minimally, and I mean, for the past year, like from last October until when I came back from India, which was probably in March, I wasn't really practicing that much. it wasn't, it was hard. And it was a period that I had to manage grief, which again, I stored all of that, which manifested in all sorts of odd ways. But coming back into my body and myself through my practice was something I needed to relearn and re-fall in love with.
And the grief that you were processing had to do with the loss of your father,
Yeah,
who
my
had
father. Yeah,
introduced you to this practice in the first place
exactly.
as well.
Yeah.
Did getting back into yoga connect you to, because here's what happens when we are grieving, we feel the absence of someone as our primary emotion, the what will not happen going forward, the loss of their presence. And
Yeah.
as we heal, we reclaim the energy of the past for its memories, for the positive things. And so, just from an exterior perspective, to me, the idea that you got back into a process as you were processing grief, particularly since your father was the person who introduced you to the practice in the first place, how do you think it aided that process? Because it would seem that it might expedite it, but that it might also intensify it.
It for me, it definitely intensified grief, which was on it like I wasn't giving myself, and I know we talked about this personally, like I wasn't giving myself space to grieve. I just put extra things on my plate and tried to push through, which was not the best way. It was a way, and it served me for a few months. And it needed to. I really needed to confront my own feelings and be okay with having grief be a part of me instead of having it pushing it away. So it did help me honestly become a little bit more inclusive of all emotions and understanding them. And that's been my own personal healing journey. I've been a little bit of a stranger to certain emotions that I always considered negative. But my reframing was it is something I don't like to feel, and it is a part of me. So might as well learn whatever this emotion, like me sitting in half pigeon right now and crying. What's it actually teaching me? What am I actually feeling? And that's the hardest part, I think, for me when I'm feeling that much pain to actually sit in it because it's not hurting my body. It's helping my body and I can feel it helping my muscles. And I'm just going to share, I have the body awareness to know that. But it is also something I need to sit in. And I'm not a big proponent of pushing through things, but sometimes staying seated for the sake of learning is really important. And that consistency is something I needed to build in my practice so I could regain muscle, honestly, regain like my tissue strength and everything back again.
One of the things that you're touching upon here, I think, is important to call attention to, which is the idea that because negative emotions it's hard to judge an emotion as negative or positive, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. If something is making you cry your eyes out, it's a lot less fun than something that makes you laugh your head off. And so
Exactly.
it's natural and human to be like, I would prefer not to open the closet with all the crying in it in my mind. But here's
Yeah.
what happens when you allow yourself to have a process that will help you access and release that energy, which is what we're talking about, is that as emotions come up, they move through you more quickly. They may be intense, but you kind of release the idea that they're defining your experience going forward. And that's the thing, that if you're healing from trauma or from bad relationships or some anything that the modern day world can bring to us, is to remember once it's over, you have a better handle on what to do with it. Sorry, guys, going forward. And I don't know if I'm going
Yeah.
to edit that out or not. So everybody, my phone just rang and I had to decline a call, but that happens sometimes. We're a professional organization here at Logical Magic in America. So that is one of the things that we can release very quickly. Oh, look, an object.
Exactly.
One of the things that we need to understand is that it is actually important to access our challenging emotions because they contain the information about what we're trying to heal to have better outcomes going forward. And so that genuinely is what one of the things that like people must think all I ever do is bag on the law of attraction. I don't. But one of the things that it teaches is not an effective strategy for emotional coping, which is to only allow yourself to think positive things and to believe that you have the life that you want and everything. Most of that
Yeah.
is denial, and it will make you so very, very sick. You cannot exist in an emotionally healthy state if your idea of emotional health is pretending or ignoring things that are hurting you, stressing you out, causing you sadness, or causing you anger and pain. And it will simply compound the problem. So even though going towards your grief caused it to be intensified, it also allowed it to become a burden that was easier to carry with each step, because a profound loss is a profound loss. And like, we've all lost people. It remains, it becomes more
Yeah.
bearable, but it is something that we need to learn how to coexist with. And that's what we're really talking about with getting into energetic flow, is learning to coexist with the parts of yourself that you find challenging and the parts of yourself that you find beneficial, and having them be equally important to you, because that is actually what energetic and emotional health is about, is understanding, if I try to pretend I'm not angry, it will just get worse. So why don't I figure out
Yeah.
why I'm angry? If I'm trying to pretend I'm not sad, then sooner or later I will simply be overwhelmed by it in a moment of watching. I know my particular favorite was, I had been repressing a great deal of grief, and I sat down to watch Victoria, which was a mini series about Queen Victoria, which I had studied English history pretty extensively. So I was mostly watching it to be like, that didn't happen. He was 20 years older than that. I mean, I was just having a good time with it. And what I didn't recognize was when her dog Dash died, that it came out of nowhere for me, because they
Mm.
depicted the scene, and I cried like I had lost every family member for 10 generations in one moment, because it
Yeah.
caused this gigantic outpouring of grief that I was not allowing myself to acknowledge. And being in a energetic flow will help keep you in touch with what's going on within you. Because when you're holding yoga practice poses, you have to acknowledge what's going on with your body, which is one of the reasons that holding something through discomfort can be very, very liberating. And it's not so that you can learn to walk forward in discomfort, but rather to understand what is going on within you is one of the biggest tools to being able to coexist with it, manage it, and thrive with it. So, can you tell me a little bit about how yoga is in your everyday?
So I mean, now I do have a consistent practice where I am teaching, so I have to be active and moving my body in that way. But I try to make like at least 15 minutes a day dedicated to a yoga practice. And that's, within the Yoga Sutras, which is a text I mentioned earlier. It's a compilation of these 196 little lines about a yoga practice. There are rules of a yoga practice that are in there, and that you practice it consistently, regularly. So it's not seasonal in terms of, I'm going to do it for 3 months for this fitness goal and then forget about it. It's how can I make 10 minutes a day? And these postures can change, but how am I making sure that I'm accessing flexibility so that I'm also achieving something different for myself? Making sure my body feels nice and mobile daily.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't have to be a long practice. It doesn't have to be an hour long heated class where you're kind of having just the most intense time of a workout. It can be a small practice, 5 to 10 minutes daily, where you're doing sun salutations, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe a few restorative postures. Maybe you just have three favorite poses that you want to work on a month, and you do that every single morning or in the evening. Um, but for me, consistency is doing something daily, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes, maybe it's an hour long, but it really depends on what I'm really feeling that day. As being in a female body, I make sure that I'm also doing things according to my cycle, so I'm not depleting myself. But depending on my energy levels, emotions, I am making sure to do that consistently. So like I have a physical practice and then always some breath work. And it can really be just deep belly breaths, putting your hand over your stomach and making sure that you feel your ribcage and belly expand with air and then retract. It's really good for your vagus nerve actually to do those deep belly breaths. It's very calming and like relaxing, nourishing for your body. And then finding a few minutes to meditate. And the way I do that, because that is actually where I'm smiling, because it's the hardest for me right now, because my brain even after I'm physically cleansed, it doesn't know how to be quiet in stillness. And it's hard. But I've found that just focusing on my chakras and just making sure I breathe into each one in just silence has been helpful. And what that means is just you kind of focus on one part of your body, breathe into it for a few minutes, and then you can move on. There's also a free app on your phone called Insight Timer that you can download. And I believe they have some free guided meditations, but they also have, you can just use a timer. And I like it because you can switch the sound you hear to kind of bring you out of a meditation. So I have a Tibetan bowl sound that I like to listen to. Um, and you can just set a timer for 2 minutes. Again, it doesn't have to be long at first. It's accessing and achieving success in a small, achievable step before you can move on to longer periods of time meditating.
You called attention to something that I want to underline a little bit, which is that the difficulty in clearing your mind. If
Hmm.
you are, and this is something that it's difficult to talk about, but if again, trauma exists in the modern day world,
Yeah.
it often causes something called hypervigilance. And with
Hmm.
hypervigilance comes all other forms of hyperactivity, meaning super intensified, having hyper focus, having an ADHD brain in which, you do not feel safe enough to focus on things. And one of the practices of yoga is getting you to concentrate on your breath, going down through your body and the way that it nourishes your body and how it feels in different points of your body. And as you are breathing in, if you're aware of your chakras, then what happens is you can feel where it's sticking. And often,
Hmm.
if you identify as a woman, if you're in a female body in this lifetime, what will happen is you will find a great deal of like almost clogged energy right around your throat chakra, because most people who identify as women spend a lot of their time not saying something.
Yeah.
We're very much, we have a lot of pressure put upon us to present a pleasant face going forward. We don't speak our truth easily. And so lingering as you bring breath down through you, where you feel that almost congestion or that tightening, and there is a corresponding color. When I'm telling people how to shield and ground, I'm actually doing exactly what you're talking about, which is drawing energy down through the chakra points and seeing the corresponding lights and energy. With the practice that I do, I tell them the corresponding archangels to ask for protection because I practice celestial and angelic magic.
Yeah.
When I want to circle back a little bit to nutrition, is
Mhm.
nutrition something that if people cannot get into a meditative space yet because they haven't healed enough yet, is
Yeah.
nutrition something that will give them a leg up on that journey?
Oh, of course. I think, if you're eating well and for your body and clean, it'll actually be easier for you to calm these fluctuations of the mind. I think there is a lot of research in terms of cleaner diet and anxiety symptoms and PTSD symptoms. All of it is improved. You can start to feel a lot more grounded when you're eating the right foods. And it just makes sense when you're fueling your body and cells the right way, they're going to do the right thing.
Right.
They'll feel a little bit better, I think, just scientifically speaking. And then energetically, let's think about the quality of the food. If you're eating food that's alive, right, with prana, which means life force in Sanskrit. If it's fruits, vegetables, whole foods, and you're consuming that, you're consuming the energy of that food, which is also going to help your body elevate to that energy and be able to hold space for a meditation better. Um, and meditation, it like in the practice that I'm sharing within yoga, it is a seated practice. It is supposed to be deep concentration, but that isn't to say that you can't concentrate in other ways to build up to this practice, right? I think anything in terms of mindful eating is also a way to connect and really get that deep concentration with your relationship to food so that you can develop that connection to your mind later on. Cleansing happens in so many different ways within your body with how you're consuming things. And then you can finally, you can take these small steps to build, if this is something you want to achieve, a meditation practice that's seated, and you can be, present with whatever your mind wants to bring to the surface at the time.
And respecting what your mind's trying to bring to the surface is one of the keys for healing. Again, we
Mhm.
talked a little bit about emotional repression and how it can keep you locked in like a basically survival mode instead
Yeah.
of learning how to thrive. And again, everything about yoga and the practice that you're talking about is connecting you to a greater awareness, not simply of your physical body, but of your spiritual body, and essentially allowing you to coexist with your spiritual self while caring for your physical self. And there are things like bedtime yoga. I've actually
Oh,
one of the things I always do research on everything. Even if it sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about, guys, I actually do go and do as much research as I can. There are bedtime practices that are designed for people to be doing in a reclined position before sleep that helps release the tension in your body, because one of the things that happens is that we're all scrunched up from all of the stress. And one of the things that yoga can do, and you're talking about sun salutations, is opening up your heart space to get greater flow as well and connecting you to life's energy, which that's called prana in yoga. Is that correct?
yeah, prana is life force, and it's within us. And when you're doing yoga and breath work, and I think even just when you do like somatic shaking, because anytime I do it, I know I've felt, and Tai Chi, you kind of feel tingly, like something's being awakened, and that just is like I don't think it's like a little like physical sensation that is prana that you can feel it. I think that's a nice thing to access, so it doesn't feel as elusive of a concept. But I
And
also wanted to share for bedtime practices that you were just mentioning. With it, I mean, this is more Ayurveda, so it's like the lifestyle part.
mhm.
But a really nice thing to do for self care before bed is also to release tension by massaging your feet. So, massage with oil is a huge part within a yoga practice, actually, too. It helps prepare your body to get for your muscles to loosen up. But even just in practices that if you before a yoga nidra practice, if you massage your feet with warm oil and just put socks on, it is going to help you relax into that state a little bit better.
When we are in greater comfort with our physical bodies, we achieve a greater connection with our spiritual self or our souls. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot behind the idea of being in comfort with and ease with your body, which is what I've
Yeah.
always understood yoga to be very, very good at, is teaching you to accept the body that you have. Because I guess I do want to ask you about that if it's okay, Aziz.
Yeah.
Yoga in the United States, and I believe in a lot of other westernized cultures, has become very like it's been in the fad state for a long while.
Yeah.
And what do you think about that? Is it in any way corrupting the idea of yoga, or does it enhance it by bringing in people who wouldn't normally be drawn to a spiritual practice who then find the benefits? And I'm genuinely asking because I don't have an opinion here. I wanted to talk to somebody who is more in a practice than I am.
Yeah. I think that so I like that yoga as at least something people understand, but I'm frustrated with the yoga in the West because it isn't portrayed correctly. And that's not to say that I don't go to studios and practice, do a class, but I also understand that what I'm doing is a workout, and it's not the spiritual practice. And when I do my spiritual practice, it's at home for 20 minutes, and it's different, right? It looks very different from this flowy. And I here's the thing: I love being in my body and flowing through a class. It brings me so much joy to move, but I separate it with this is my movement, and this is what I'm just doing to make my body feel good and feel like I have access to the muscles that I want to have access to. And then I have my yoga practice, which is actually my connection to what my body needs for that season, what I know it needs for that time of day. And again, maybe that time of the month, because of being in a female body, I know where my hormones are, and I kind of know what might be a bit more nourishing for my body and brain at that day. And then I can connect to a meditation. So I actually get to connect in the way that is yoga with a capital Y every single day, because I understand and value that it's not about the physical practice and looking a certain way. as the West has unfortunately made it out to be.
They've turned it into an aesthetic practice when ideally
Yeah,
it's a spiritual one. And
exactly.
it's not that there's anything wrong with having like a standard for how you wish to look. Like, we're not condemning anybody who is in a yoga practice because they like what it does for their butt. But
Mm,
really, what yoga is meant to do is to help you be connected to your physical self, to have greater access to your spiritual self. And what I do see in so many people who are doing yogic practices is that it is for the physical. And we're always trying to, when I tell people in the head and heart battle is always choose the head when you're trying to figure things out, because approach
yeah.
things logically. But the heart is our physical self as well. And ideally, you
Mhm.
want to be in balance. And a yogic practice that only touches upon the physical, it can help your physical body. It can help with your flexibility, which will help with perception of age and a great many other things. But it does not open a door that is easily accessed through what you're trying to do with yoga. Meaning that it's kind of like getting on the interstate and parking your car. Like, it's like like you're not going anywhere with it, and yet all of
Yeah.
the destinations that yoga can help you go towards are available. So one of the reasons I want to bring that up is that if you are doing yoga and you are doing one in a very westernized studio, one of the things that you might want it to look into is into the more meditative side in your own time,
Yeah.
because the flow that you're achieving in a class, it doesn't leave you. It does continue, and that is something that is there for you to harness. And speaking of
Yeah.
harnessing yoga, Aziz, where do you teach and where can people find you?
Oh, thank you. I teach at Agora Power of Yoga. It's in Agora Hills, California, and I teach there on Sundays at 9 a.m.
Mhm.
The class I'm teaching right now is called Slow Flow and Meditation. So if you choose to come to a class, you are going to get a physical practice, but I do leave room for meditation and it is guided.
Mhm.
And we also do some breath work, but I don't want to scare anyone with breath work. It's yogic breath that is very nourishing. I try to keep into accountability, to try to understand that everyone comes in with a different breathwork practice, even for that.
And that's Sundays in Agora Hills, California. Do they have a
Yes,
website?
it does. I believe it's agorapowerofyoga.com.
Agora? A U
G
O R.
A G, yeah, AGOURA, powerofyoga.com.
Thank you, because Agora Hills,
Yeah.
you pronounce it one way, and then when you see it on the sign the first time, you're like, I have no.
I understand. It's funny.
And then you are also skilled in things like nutrition. Do you offer any forms of life coaching or health coaching, or are you planning to going forward?
Yes, I actually do. So I am an Ayurvedic holistic health coach, and I am taking clients. It is my passion. I love sharing that gift with the world, even just for a small consultation. I feel like it's really helpful for people to understand their body type and know what kind of yoga is helpful for them in terms of just specific postures, and how to eat for their body.
And do you have an email address or a website where people can reach you for that?
Yes, so my email is azizulkoryoga@gmail, and I'll spell that out. It's AZIZULLKAURYOGA @gmail.com.
And I'll drop a link to the email for Aziz both in the description box for the episode. And then if you catch this on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, Cronecast at the Rising Moon, it will be in the description box, everybody. This is my client and also a lovely human being, Aziz Kaur. And thank you so much for joining me, Aziz. You have the perfect energy from this, and you also approach it from a very authentic standpoint, and it was introduced into your life in a very authentic way. And it's not saying that westernized yoga is inauthentic, but it approaches things from a very aesthetic standpoint, where the truest benefit of yoga is in conquering the ability to have a soul and a spiritual connection within you that nourishes you in a world that so frequently depletes us. So, guys, I'm Elaine. You can find me here at Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. I have new episodes every week. You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book a tarot card reading, a life coaching session. I even teach magic, but I only teach magic to people who are suited to angelic and celestial magic. And that's not to say it excludes people. It's not the right call for everybody. Not everybody has the same calling. And you can find me at Cronecast at the Rising Moon on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining me today, Aziz. I hope all of life's beautiful energy flows through you and to you. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
There we go.